Here we are again. Thank you so much for coming, Dr. Lee Coleman. And we've made our way from introducing this subject of protecting children in general to protecting children from sexual abuse. And last time I told you that we have developed and we are burdened to this day with a system which becomes child abusers themselves. And of course I don't mean physical abusers, I don't mean sexual abusers, but what I mean is people who use methods which they have been they have been taught to do by people in my profession, the mental health professions. And we're now about ready to move into documenting what they are doing, explaining why they are doing it, because we'll never figure out how to get out of it until we understand why they're doing it and try to figure out a better way. Last time I said I was going to start with a program in Santa Clara County, which is near San Francisco, in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, a program that was started by Henry Giaretto, a social worker. But on further thinking about it, I want to give you a little more direct link to what you've already heard me talk about. We've had 4 sessions on the McMartin preschool case, probably the best known of those early daycare cases, which all fizzled out either at the time of the trial, where the corruption of the investigative process came out and they were not convicted because the evidence was just not there, or cases which fell apart after a person serving years in prison, but appeals courts recognized what had happened. So I mentioned a psychiatrist there, Dr. Roland Summit, somebody who was one of the major supporters of what interviewers were claiming, what police were claiming, what prosecutors were claiming about the supposedly terrible things that had been done at the McMartin preschool. The truth was, because I have studied all that evidence, I was a participant in several aspects of those cases, that there was never any evidence that any child had ever been molested at the McMartin preschool case. The only evidence was of the unprofessional behavior of every community that was part of the case. Unprofessional behavior of the police, unprofessional behavior of the people who were interviewing the children, unprofessional behavior of the therapists who the children were then sent to on the alleged basis that they had been molested, unprofessional behavior of the district attorney's office, and so forth. And Dr. Summit was a person who was writing editorials in the Los Angeles Times supporting the interview methods that were done by the Children's Institute International, despite the fact that later on he admitted he'd never watched 1 minute of one tape. He'd never seen them, yet he was claiming that these methods were proper. So I want to start with Dr. Summit's most renowned or praised piece of work, the so-called child sexual abuse accommodation syndrome. I talked about it in a previous session. I want to review that to illustrate the bogus, unthinking, careless, casual ideas that he put out, which then got so casually accepted by both the investigative community and the mental health community. Dr. Summit claimed that there was a syndrome meaning a pattern. In medicine, a syndrome is a pattern of symptoms or findings which suggest strongly what the cause is. Remember now, only when you know the cause of a problem, a medical cause, do we make a diagnosis. But Dr. Summit was carelessly using this word syndrome in the behavioral field, in which you can never demonstrate that behaviors prove what is the cause, in this case, whether a child's been sexually abused. So he had 5 categories. He said that a child that's been sexually abused will keep it a secret. He said that a child that's being sexually abused will be helpless. That is, they will not be able to stop it. He said that they will be trapped in it and they will accommodate to it. That is, they will try to figure out ways to get on with their life, even though they're not telling anybody, they can't stop it, and they may not be showing it in any way. That is, they're not failing in school, they're not taking drugs, they're not having temper problems, they're not engaged in some sexual behavior. There's nothing you can see. That when they do say something about it, they may demonstrate what he called delayed, conflicted, and unconvincing disclosure. Because they're young enough, they may not be able to explain everything the way you would hope that an adult or even a teenager might be able to tell you. And that they might later on retract it. Those are the 5 categories. Secrecy, helplessness, entrapment, and accommodation, delayed, conflicted, and unconvincing disclosure, and finally they may retract it. That was a syndrome, according to Dr. Summit, which a child would show in all likelihood if they were being sexually abused. Now, there was only one problem with that, and that is that every single one of those categories is a non-category. It's completely unhelpful. If your job is to find out whether the child has been sexually abused. Dr. Summit wrote a paper entitled The Child Sexual Abuse Accommodation Syndrome in 1983, in which he said children don't ever make allegations. They don't make detailed statements about sexual abuse to interviewers unless it really happened. So basically, he more or less did away with the problem by saying, if they say it happened, it happened. And your job as a mental health professional or as an investigator, either way, your job is to believe what the child said. To take the child's statements as being accurate. Why? Because the child would not say it if it were not true. Now, that's a pretty important thing to say, because that means that if your job is to work in Child Protection Agency, to find out, to investigate situations where children, and find out those situations so that a child will be protected, it's supposed to be based on a finding that the child has been abused. And if you are a police officer involved in the same thing, that's also your job. The truth is what you must try to find. But in fact, because of the influence of people like Dr. Summit, they stopped doing it. That is, Dr. Summit and other people that he became allied with, and I'm not putting it all on him, but if you had to pick one person who had more influence than anybody else, he would be the one. And I don't think it's coincidence that he was a psychiatrist, not a social worker, not a some other type of professional, but a psychiatrist. The investigative community, police, social workers, and the therapeutic community all began to adopt the point of view that this model, believe the child, that became the mantra. That became the thinking that you didn't have to question. It's the reason why when I wrote an article evaluating, critiquing Dr. Summit's syndrome, so-called syndrome, I called it false allegations of child sexual abuse. Have the experts been caught with their pants down? Now, I knew that that title might be, some people might say, we don't think you should be flippant on a topic like the possible abuse of a child. And I think if you know me at all from these topics, from these talks, and you see how I talk to you, you know that's not who I am. If I want to try to be flippant, I'll do it on some other subjects, but not about my work. I care very strongly about it, and I don't try to hide that, even when I go to court. Many people think the strength of my testimony is compromised, but sorry about it, folks, that's the way I am. So my hope was that it was not going to be seen as flippant. What I meant was, due to the kind of thinking that Dr. Summit was advocating, the experts did not think about the problem of, well, are the allegations true or not? And that's what it means to be caught with your pants down. We've all been caught with our pants down, haven't we? And it has nothing to do with sex, maybe in that arena too, but it has to do with life. It means you didn't think about something. You weren't prepared. And why am I making such a big fuss of this? Because today we have a system in which the people who are paid to find the truth, police officers, social workers, attorneys, prosecuting attorneys, judges, do not want to think about the problem of whether an allegation is true or false. They want to assume that it's true because it's easier. And their trainers, the people who've taught them, never talk about it. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to talk about the people who've done that training and who've closed people's minds. So the way we're going to start with that is we're going to talk about Dr. Summit's so-called syndrome. Now, I told you there are 5 categories. I'm only going to talk about the first one because it would take more and more time to go through all 5, because what I'm going to show you is true of his first category, secrecy, is equally true for all 5. So Dr. Summit said a child who's been sexually abused is not going to talk about it. They're going to keep it a secret. Well, he's right. Of course, it could be true that they will say. And we've made some gains in society where children now are more likely to tell. And I'm glad that's true. I hope you are. We don't want children who are being victimized to be afraid to tell. And the movement that I'm so critical of should take some credit for developing programs which teach parents to be willing to hear what a child has to say, programs which encourage children to be able to say something. That's good. But why in heaven would we want to create a system which would be blind to the possibility that it might not be true, and actually create a situation that invites situations where we miss it when it is not true? So let's look at this issue of secrecy. If a child that has been molested may not be telling somebody about it, which we know does happen, that means that between the time when they have been molested and the time that they now finally do tell somebody, we couldn't say that in that period of time they have kept a secret. Let's say, for argument's sake, that it was a year before. They are now telling somebody that they were abused. So they kept a secret for a year. But if the child was not abused a year ago, then the fact that they are saying it now, there was no secret because nothing happened. So you can't take the lack of a statement until now as a secret unless you presume that they were molested a year ago. Instead, what you have is nothing. There's nothing there, and some other explanation is the reason why they're saying it now. And all investigators need to ignore this idea that you assume there's a secret and you simply try to find out what allegedly happened a year ago, that means thorough, neutral interviewing techniques. In your mind, you don't assume anything. You don't adopt what Summit said is children would never say anything happened unless it did happen. Who has been talking to the child between when something might have happened and now? What is their point of view? How have they talked to the child? And that includes family members, friends of the child, adult or child. It includes professionals who have talked to the child before the latest person has talked to them. We'll be going into some of that in more detail. But that's an example of where the system developed in a way which basically said children are being sexually abused. That's true, and we know that, no problem with that. But children will never say that they were abused, no matter how anybody might have talked to them, any kind of pressures they might have been put under, unless they were actually abused. Believe the child was drilled into the professional community. Children don't lie about sexual abuse. That was the parallel statement. Believe the child, and children don't lie about sexual abuse. And let me just finish this session by illustrating again how shallow the thinking was of the people because of the mistraining. To say that a child couldn't be lying about sexual abuse means that you only need to be concerned about is, are they lying or are they telling the truth? Those are two possibilities. Having your pants down, in the sense that I've been talking about it, not thinking about all the possibilities, also applies to how does memory work? Is only when people say something that is not true a lie? What about the situations where you say something that you believe is true and you don't realize that your source, you lost track of why you think it's true? We've all done that because memory is not a tape recorder. We can distort things. We can believe things that have no basis in reality at all, or everything in between. People were not prepared for the idea of a child who is saying something that they're not lying. They honestly picture it in their mind, but it's not in their mind because of actual events. And that's because of people like Dr. Summit. And he, like I said, I could list off a couple of dozen people who became the leaders of this movement to protect children from sexual abuse, but in the process developed a system which we have to this day, which does a very bad job. It actually abuses children themselves. The protectors become the abusers, and innocent people go to prison, and children are damaged. So we're going to move in the next session from Dr. Summit as a representative of that community to the people who he learned it from. Dr. Summit didn't do any research, so he didn't get it there. He was not a therapist, so he didn't get it from that. He got it from listening to social workers come and talk to him. And he got it from people like Henry Giaretto in Santa Clara Juvenile Probation Department. That's where we're going to go next time. In that session, or maybe another one, you will have the background to understand the system that we now have, which does not know how to tell whether children have been abused and is regularly committing grave injustices. Thanks for coming. See you next time.